Welcome to the Podcaster's Guide to a Visible Voice. Reveal and define your voice to speak your truth through the power of podcasting. And I'm your host, Mary Chan.
So let's go.
Thank you so much for joining me today. And thank you for all the follows and comments over at Instagram. I would love to catch up with you over there too. And as always, I love hearing from you, so please let me know if there's any specific topic about your voice that you would love for me to cover, and I'll probably answer it in a future episode. I thought I'd start today with something that has been really on everybody's minds lately. It's a bit of a continuation from the last episode about why audio is more powerful than video. So in today's episode, I want to highlight how to speak confidently on video. Although my work primarily has been behind the mic and never really in front of the camera, a lot of things are still the same. How you use your voice won't change. And because I've been running my business online since 2018, I've learned a thing or two about how to use video effectively for your voice. We're all online these days, and in 2020, it's a bit of a weird time. We're all getting on Zoom for our daily calls and getting Zoom fatigue. It's a real thing. What is happening is that we're uncomfortable in the situation we're in and overthinking things on these video calls. That affects our voice. All right, you're logged on, but then you think, does my hair look right? Uh-oh, what's that in my background? And, oh, what is happening with their background? Why do I always tilt my head to this one side? Will I sound okay on the other end? But then what am I going to say? And, oh, there you are. Oh, can you hear me? Can you hear me? And then you're wondering, oh, where's that mute button? Or unmute sometimes when you start these things. So many things to be thinking about to just have a conversation. We're now put into these little Zoom boxes online, and nothing about any of this is natural. However, we need to get out of our own heads, away from thinking about what's going to happen in the future, to only thinking about the present moment. That's how we're going to get through these Zoom calls. It doesn't matter what's going on in the future. You'll get to that when it comes. They don't like what you're going to say? Deal with it then when it shows up. They won't agree with your ideas? Forget about that. You don't even know that is true at this very present moment. Be in the now and focus on your facts. What is it that you want to say? What is your end goal for this video call? Then speak your truth. If you're out of your head, you're not using up that brain power thinking about things you can't control. You can control your message, how you're going to say something, and be unapologetically honest about it. And then there's also energy. Video strips away some of that energy. Because of the slight delays in audio and video, our brain has to work that much harder to understand this unnatural interaction that we're having on these calls. I'm not only talking about your physical energy, which, yes, can be used to elevate your voice, but I'm solely looking at vocal energy here. And I'm not talking about yelling or being louder and that type of energy, but having that variety in your voice to show complexity. You want to hold people's attention with the energy in your voice. Even more so on video calls because of what we talked about earlier. And to do that, you need variety in your voice to keep people guessing. If you talk in the same way every single time and end your sentences all the same way, you talk like this. You don't sound like you're interested because you're lacking energy. You need to be vibrant in your voice by pausing, slowing down if you're a fast talker, or talk a little bit more quickly at times to get your point across. It's the use of these variables in your voice that will hold your listeners' attention. This goes for video or not on video, audio only, or wherever you are, in a meeting, your group of friends or family, or being in person. Your voice has the power to grab your listeners' attention by being unpredictable. And I know a lot of podcasters are using Zoom for their interviews. And although that's not my usual go-to recommendation, I understand it's easy and now kind of familiar enough to go that route. But remember that traditionally, podcasting is audio only. Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, Google Podcasts, they are audio only, and that's where the majority of your podcast listeners are. So you don't want your video when you're conducting the interview to distract from the conversation that's going on. So when you're having your interview on Zoom and in the video in the background, you start talking about how you can see their lovely garden, it's beautiful. That actually does nothing for your podcast listeners. They can't see that. So instead, describe what you are seeing. State it like a fact and how it makes you feel, so your listeners can feel that emotion too. For example, instead of, "I see you have a garden behind you. Are those tomato plants?" You could say, "You have a lush green garden full of tomato plants ripe and ready for picking. I love buying farm fresh produce at my local market every weekend. They taste so much better than the regular big grocery stores." So there's actually two things here that you've established when you do this. One, you've given your listener a visual. You've described what you are seeing. Two, you've actually provided a little insight into your own life, which is something listeners love. And I'll get to that on another episode. But basically, when you're having your conversation on Zoom, you don't want to be pointing things out visually so that your listener can't be engaged with you. They won't understand what's going on because there's nothing to see on their end. So my tech tip for you, actually, I have two. If you're on the desktop version of Zoom, you can hide your self-view. Do that. It will change your video calling experience forever because normally you're not staring at yourself in a real-life in-person meeting. So why are you looking at yourself when you are online? That's awkward, and you start to overanalyze everything about yourself, which again, as I said before, is not being in the now and focusing on your message. It's good to double check off the top if everything is looking good on video, but then after that, hide your self-view. You don't need to look at yourself. Tech tip number 2, if you really have to use Zoom, treat your show like it's a radio call-in show. You know how on the radio, the host always sounds full and polished, while the caller or the person they're interviewing is on the phone? They have that phone sound to them? You can have that sound too for your own voice by recording with a microphone on a different platform on your end, and then recording the Zoom call on a separate track for each participant. So in Zoom, there's a setting to do that. Make sure you check off that you are recording a separate track for each participant. That way you can split your Zoom call from your guest and yourself, and then use the local recording you've recorded separately to have your voice be radio-like, full and rich.
Zoom compresses your audio, so you can either sound like this on Zoom,
or sound like this, more rich and full, so it sounds like your listener is in the same room as you, like a fly on the wall listening in on the conversation. That's one way to make an emotional connection with your audience. So that's it from me today. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you put some of these tips into practice this week. And then let me know how it goes. Like I said earlier, you can always find me on Instagram at Visible Voice Podcast, or you can always email me too, visiblevoicepodcast@gmail.com. Thank you so much for listening to the Podcaster's Guide to a Visible Voice. If you enjoyed this episode, I'd love it if you'd share it with a podcasting friend. And to reveal more voicing and podcasting tips, click on over to visiblevoicepodcast.com. Until next time.